Welcome to episode 30 of Pull Up with Myles and Owen. We have made it to 30 episodes. We are so excited. And we have a very exciting, a little bit different episode today. As you're going to see, you might see some wine bottles in the picture here. We're going to get to that in a moment. But first, we have to introduce our legendary guest, a dear friend of the podcast, and the second ever guest of this podcast, Terrika Foster-Brasby. She is an on-air analyst for CBS Sports. She is a co-host of the excellent 3-on-3 podcast with the Inflection Network, a current sideline reporter and analyst for the Connecticut Sun, co-host of the Around the Rim podcast. She's got bylines in Anscape, the New York Times, W Slam. Come on. And if all that wasn't enough, she is the only member of the podcast that we've ever had to hang up on the legendary Vin Scully. And if you want that story, you're going to have to go back to episode 2. Detroit in the house. T, thank you so much for joining us. How's it going?
I am already going to need a sip of this wine because memories of hanging up on Vin Scully. My God. Rest in peace, Vin. And thank you for not hating me.
So without any further ado, we should talk about the wine because this is a very special episode. Crema last month joined the WNBA as the league's official wine partner of both. So it's both the WNBA, the NBA, and the USA basketball women's national team. It's the first ever wine partnership for the W. It's a women-led company, so it's a natural alignment. And they said that they are offering enthusiasts a taste of sophistication that aligns with the excitement of the game. They're going to be doing activations at All-Star Weekend, select WNBA experiences. And wine, like sports, has the unique ability to connect people globally. So this partnership is something we're really excited about, and they reached out to us, and that is the level of support. When they're buying into the WNBA, this is not just one of those sponsors that just slaps their name on something. They're really looking at the conversations that are being had around the sport. So we're really grateful to them for sending us bottles of wine to enjoy this episode. And I think that's going to make this episode turn up to 11. So with that being said, welcome, T. And it feels right to be talking to you with a drink in our hands. This feels like, all right, this is normal for us.
It feels so authentic. And those of you listening will really have to understand the dynamic between myself, Owen, and Myles to know why this feels like a regular day for us. But thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. The only thing that could make it more of the natural dynamic is if we had Kareem in here. If we had
Kareem.
then it would be it might be too much. The people would not be ready for that type of content. Well, we wanted to start with probably the newsiest item, and in something that dropped on the first day of training camp that blindsided me. I think it blindsided most of us. Candace Parker, the legend, the GOAT, announcing her retirement. As someone who's been around this league, working in this league, with this league for a long time, I would just love to get some of your memories of watching Candace Parker play, covering Candace Parker, and just what she means to us and to the greater basketball community.
Yeah, well, it's crazy because, Candace and I are not too far off in age. Like I have her by a couple years. So her college years are my college years, like her early years are my early years, right? And so it was just really interesting to wake up and hear this news. I don't think that I was surprised that she, chose to retire. She has said on numerous occasions that there were way more years behind her than in front of her. She was facing an injury that really would have put her back on the surgical table again. And after a while, it just kind of takes the fun out of basketball, I would imagine, if you are continually having to go through injuries, continuing to have to rehab. She stated that, mentally I had to come to the terms pretty much with the fact that I no longer really had what I wanted to give to the game of basketball. And so I wasn't surprised, but I was definitely shocked, right? I was shocked because one of all the days you decide that you would like to leave the game, you do it on the first day of training camp. My God, it reminded me of a few years ago how Simone Augustus was like, the day that rosters had to be submitted, she was like, yeah, I'm going to buy out. I'm going to buy out. So it was just one of those things. I have been a fan of Candace Parker all of her basketball life. Like ever since Tennessee up until, this past Sunday, I've been a fan of Candace Parker. She's been someone who genuinely has transcended generations. I mean, you think about when we were younger, people wanted to play at Tennessee because they wanted to play like Candace Parker. You look at people coming into the league now, and when you ask them, who's your favorite player? They say, I grew up loving Candace Parker. When you ask bigs and post players about who they want to emulate their game like, they say, I'd love to be able to handle the rock and still be an efficient post like Candace Parker. Like there aren't too many athletes that are able to truly transcend generations like that. So she's certainly going to be missed. Her impact is going to be felt across many sectors of this game, from being one of the first to, or I won't even say one of the first, but I think one of the most prominent moms who truly put her family and put her kid on full display as a mom and an athlete. I mean, there were plenty other mom athletes before Candace Parker, but everybody knows Layla, right? And they know Layla because Candace made us fall in love with Layla. So it's just so much to her career. I don't even know if anyone on any level will have enough time to go into how much she meant to women's basketball, but we are certainly going to miss her.
I'm blanking on the name of the reporter who asked this question at training camp yesterday, but we had a scrum around Courtney Vandersloot. And wait, Owen, was it you? It might have actually been you, Owen, asking about Candace's impact. And
hey, I'm a forgettable face, forgettable name. I get it. I only co-host a podcast with you.
it was, but the question was about her impact. And Courtney said, like, it's easy to forget now that like this stretch forward, this point forward was not a thing. And now everyone, you cannot get on the floor unless you're also shooting the ball a little bit, unless you're also passing the ball, unless you're smart and cerebral like that. And that is Candace Parker's legacy on the court. Off the court, it's also absolutely everything that you already brought up, and she is synonymous, and I think brought to me, even before I was actively a WNBA fan and then WNBA media, she was just always kind of in the air, right? I think that she was someone who transcended the W in those lean years and was someone who was on Sports Center highlights, who everyone knew who she was in the space. And she's just, it's okay. A selfish thing for me is the trend where we don't get to say goodbye. And I love that for the player, that in terms of saying, I'm ready to hang up, or I'm ready to hang it up, or I'm controlling my narrative, because so much, as we know, Candace especially, her narrative has been stripped from her, right? She has not controlled every step of her career, every step along the way. But how do we honor the legends of the W that do decide to call it a career before we can give them their flowers? When you talk about Simone Augustus, or what we saw with Sylvia Fowles, or Maya Moore leaving before any of us were ready to say goodbye, how can we make sure that we're going to do right by them? Because this entire season should be an homage to Candace and everything she's done.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question to answer in regards to being able to say goodbye to a player that you weren't prepared to say goodbye to, right? Like we knew that Sue and Phil were leaving, right? So we had an opportunity to prepare. And granted, we even still had the fight there. And that's a different conversation for a different day. But the disparity in coverage between the two failed world tours, even in that regard, was very interesting. But again, we at least had the knowledge that they were leaving. So you could prepare for what it would look like to give them really cool gifts and to show up and support them. For Maya, we had no idea the last time we saw Maya was going to be the last time we saw Maya, right? For Simone, literally the day that we were supposed to submit rosters, that teams were supposed to submit rosters, was the day she decided that that day in LA was going to be her last day as a player, and she would then go into coaching. Same for Candace, right? Just a month ago, Candace was announced as having to resign with Las Vegas. So the preparation was we were going to get another year of Candace, not necessarily a final year of Candace, but we knew we were going to get another year of her. So it's difficult to really celebrate in the way that we feel that they should be celebrated. But I think what we can do is, one, ensure that every step of the way they are commended and thanked and recognized for what they brought to the game. Now, it's going to be a lot easier to do that this year with Simone Augustus because this is her Hall of Fame year. So quite literally, Minnesota should be going all out for Simone Augustus each and every time. Anywhere she goes, if you know, as a staff member for LA, every team who has an opportunity to be able to play alongside her and work with her needs to be able to do that. So those are the kind of things that I think you can do. But as it relates to Candace, and she never said this, so I don't want anybody to be like, oh, Candace said this. No, Candace ain't saying this. Terrika is saying this. Terrika is saying that I appreciate that she didn't tell anybody she was leaving. And why I appreciate that is because the media has not done right by Candace, specifically over the last few years, right? We have seen the stories. We have watched, you know, how people have tried to erase her and her legacy from certain conversations. We've seen players call her overrated. We've seen the media vote her defensive player of the year and don't even put her on the all defensive team. We've seen the media, we've seen folks who swear they love women's basketball act as if Candace is not a part of the reason why women's basketball is where it is today. I mean, for a stretch there, Candace pretty much had the WNBA on her back. She was what everyone knew the WNBA to be, right? So a part of me is like, I'm kind of glad, sis, that you ain't doing this because you don't need the fake love. You don't need the folks who were just 2 years ago saying that you were overrated. Now all of a sudden singing your praises and bringing you gifts, right? Like celebrate with those who truly love you, who truly appreciate you, who truly understood your value, and let those of us who also truly love you and appreciate your value sing your praises for you, right? Like you don't have to be in front of these folks for them to give you the fake love that they couldn't give you while you were still playing. So part of me is kind of happy that she walked away the way she did. It's actually very Candace-like when you think about it, just similar to how she got married, right? Nobody knew Candace was married. Well, some people knew, but those people really know how to keep a secret. Like they can be my friends any day because they can really keep a damn secret. But that was the kind of, like, I guess you can say it's a pattern that we've started to witness where she makes the decision, she keeps it small and intimate in her circle, and it works for her. This to me was no different.
I'm so glad you highlighted that aspect of it because I am thinking back to that season when she was named Defensive Player of the Year and was left off both first team and second team all defense. That's 10 spots. Doesn't make any sense. And her only response was an Instagram post with a picture of her on the beach and the caption unbothered. And that was what I thought about when she retired on Sunday, is she is doing this in the most unbothered Candace way possible. And it's so beautiful that she is doing that because like you said, there is so much fakeness. I'm not even gonna get into the Derek Fisher Instagram post. Like,
oh my God, what in the hell? Derek, what? It's not even respectability politics at this point because we already know, like, that's a lie. The person who benched her in an elimination game, sir, get off my timeline.
Wild. Absolutely wild. And I think that it's also important to discuss the disparity in coverage for Sylvia Fowles and Sue Bird because Candace Parker checks every single box.
Yep.
Every single box, from being exceptional in media to being larger than basketball to being just the absolute epitome of what you want in a great basketball player. Yep. And we kind of went through a weird period of her career between the sparks and the sky where the league decided to crown Diana as the GOAT of the league. It was all just like, oh, it was just accepted. And there's GOAT talk with Sue and Diana. And this is nothing against Sue and Diana at all, or Diana's greatness. But this idea that it's ubiquitous that, oh, Diana's just the GOAT of the league rubbed me the wrong way, which brings me to my favorite memory of Candace, which is the homecoming which is 2021, and which is all of the leadership that she displayed on that Sky team. Anyone who knows me, anyone who follows me knows that Ka is like my favorite player. The relationship that those two developed, the love that they have for each other, and the care that Candace displayed for every person on that team led them to win that championship. And I'll never forget the waning moments of Game 4, and Candace and Sloot and Quigley, all the veterans on that team, just unbelievable in the second half of that game. And once it finally was clear with like 4 or 5 seconds left that it was over, and Candace starts to well up, and the minute the buzzer sounds, she just runs to her family. And it was just the most poetic and perfect representation of who she is. It's like, I'm doing this on my terms, and fuck all the noise. Like, I just brought it home for my city. So I was excited to share that. That was the first thing I thought of on Sunday. It's like all the mess of those couple years. She's like, no, this is who I am.
That was such a great memory, Owen, because during that finals, I was working that finals, and I remember being on the court with my phone, and my coworker was across from me with her phone. We were working in social at that time, and we, from 2 different angles, were able to capture like the famous moment of her doing this to Layla, telling Layla like come so that they could hug each other, and it was the best thing. And it was one of those things where it's like, I know that I'm working, and I know like I probably should be in the moment, but I was so in the moment. It was so many things that happened around Candace that year. Number one, she was the first real free agent after that groundbreaking CBA to make a splash. Like nobody else had decided to do that. Candace did it. They did not have the best season that year. They were still getting to know each other. There was still chemistry that was accumulating within them that season. They ended the season like at 500.
Yeah, they were 500.
Yeah, they were a 500 team. And I remember specifically because I was covering Connecticut, and I was like, dog, this is like a rivalry. This is a dog fight between you guys. And Chicago just seemed to get the better of them every single time. So it was truly like a transformational season, I think, for her, because all of the success that she had in LA, I think it just really showed you, like, one, just because you have success in one place doesn't automatically mean that it comes at a second place, but it also showed you her growth, right? And it also showed you exactly the kind of player you were getting in a Candace Parker, because that same team would not have won a championship without her. Like it is what it is. They would not have won that championship without her. And so it's just wild to think about, like, all of the accolades, all of the records that she broke, that she set, that I don't know if we'll ever see again. Like I don't know if there's another player who's going to win Rookie of the Year and MVP in the same season. I don't know if there's another player who's going to come out the gate with 3 championships for 3 different teams. Like, I don't know. Like, that's some LeBron James type shit. You know what I mean? Like that's a Cleveland, Miami, and LA. Like, that's some LeBron James shit, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting to see not only her legacy, but how her legacy inspires players that come after her to try to accomplish and surpass what she's done.
One of my favorite bits, I think it was during the postseason last year, was when Curtis from Across the Timeline changed it to Candace Parker's Across the Timeline, because every record that the site brought up, it was like number 1 Candace Parker, number 2 whoever just did it.
Yes.
She is up and down the record book. And I know we got to move on. I think we could just make this just an hour of talking about Candace, and maybe we should. But the one last thing I wanted to say on it is, in New York recently, we saw John Sterling, the longtime radio host of the Yankees, about 2 weeks into the season, and he's in his 80s, and he was just like, I'm retiring, I'm done. And it hit us hard in a similar way, because it was just like, that was the voice we grew up with. But then I was like, I appreciate someone going to work one day and just being like, nah, that's not for me. And I think that's what Candace did the first day of training camp, where she was like, I worked so hard to get back here, and you know what? I'm ready to go on to something else. And we've been teased a little bit about what that next thing is going to be, but whatever it's going to be is just going to be absolute excellence. And the league the world will continue to be better for it. So just thank you to Candace, because so much of what the WNBA is owes itself to Candace Parker.
Cheers
Follow
to a
Candace.
legendary career. Come on.
Come on, Candace. If I could do one thing in the world as good as Candace plays basketball, I will be okay. I will be.
It's a little depressing being in media, and I'm like, I mean, I don't even do the media close to as well as she does it. Like that was just
I
somebody.
think, yeah.
She's already lapped all of us.
She's already left all of us. You know what, Candace? This is the one thing I do as well as you play basketball. I can do that great, exceptional.
Now, I got something else for you, T. Let's talk about the Connecticut Sun.
Oh,
this
shit.
is something that you do as well as anybody. Lots of turnover. Lots of turnover. Tip Hayes retired. Beck Allen went off to Phoenix, but then lots of new faces coming in. Tiffany Mitchell, Mariah Jefferson, Breezy back off injury.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think about how last year the conversation evolved into Vegas and New York, but before Bree Jones got hurt, that was a 3-team race, really, and we're going to see that again. Plus now Seattle in the mix. But first, let's focus on Connecticut. What have you seen this? I don't know if you've gotten to camp yet, but what have you seen this offseason, and what's the energy like there? Because that is a team that had a chip on its shoulder 5 years ago, and they're just chipping away every year. So what have you seen from that squad so far?
I don't think this team will ever not have a chip on the shoulder, and it should. Like, it should continue to play every season like the world hates them, because this is how they best operate, to be honest. I would even say well past Breezy's injury, was it still a three-headed race for the finals last year. There were moments where they could not get over the New York hump. And then when they finally did, it was like, wow, New York may be in trouble if they figure this thing out. With all that being said, I have to give a lot of credit to Stephanie White, right? I think what last year did for this year's team was give that core a solid, already a team that had familiarity with each other. But I think the core now has a familiarity with Stephanie. And that makes it a lot easier this year coming into camp, just trying to figure out where the pieces are. Now, there aren't a lot of spots that are available for Connecticut right now, just based on who's coming back, based on who's expected to be returned, based on contracts that have been signed. There probably are about a good 4 spots available, maybe 3, and there's about 10 players competing for them, right? So it's going to be interesting to see, specifically in the shooting guard position and a point guard position. Those are the two. The guard position is the position that I think is the most interesting. Now, you mentioned Mo Jeff being back. She's someone who's obviously very familiar with playing in the Connecticut market as a Huskies legend. Rachel Banham is also back. She started her career in Connecticut. So it should be interesting as well to have her back in a Sun uniform. There are a lot of fans here who really enjoyed watching Rachel her first couple of years here. So it should be interesting. But I think, to me, looking at some of these rookies and seeing how they adapt to playing the style of basketball that Stephanie White has implemented, like, she's completely restructured this offense. I love the fact that Bonner and Thomas and Breezy are obviously going to set the tone. And very sadly, I don't expect Alyssa Thomas to have the kind of season that she had last year, because that was just otherworldly. But that don't mean I expect Liz to just be chilling. Hell no. Like, she's going to bring that fire and intensity, because this could very well be, as we talk about last year's together, this could very well be the last time that we see this core group of Breezy, Alyssa Thomas, and Dewana Bonner together again. So I think this is the year that they're really going to lay it all on the line, and they have a little bit more of comfortability with Stephanie in doing that than they did last year. And that's a good thing.
I think that this might be the most difficult training camp roster to crack. When you look at not just all of the names, but the fact that when they brought in Stu Du and when they brought in Rachel Banham, they are guaranteed veteran spots also. So that's already 2 bench spots that are spoken up for. So that's 6. That's half your roster, and that does not include Dewana Bonner. That doesn't include Ty Harris, and those spots are spoken for. Dejanay on her last season of a rookie deal.
Yeah.
And after what we saw from Ono last year, Olivia Nelson-Ododa in the playoffs, I feel like she's got to be there. But then you've got Shea Petty, you've got Sydney Weiss, you've got Jocelyn Willoughby, who's one of our favorites. You've got the rookies, you've got Leah Brown, who was on the team. So there are so many people that have a shot, and that camp just seems like it's going to be ridiculous, like for the next couple of weeks. But you brought up something fascinating about Stephanie White that I didn't think about until you were saying it. But how difficult is it to come in where a culture has already been set with a core, and Kurt Miller was there and brought that team to heights that they hadn't seen before, really,
Yeah.
to then be able to reset and earn the respect and change things up. And there was no drop off. There was no drop off at all. So to be able to do that, and like you said, I don't know that I agree that AT won't exceed what she did last year, just because I would never bet against her.
Oh, don't do
But
that.
she's going to have some more help this year. She's going to have some
Well,
more help. So I think
yeah.
like everything, it's just an impressive organization top to bottom when you talk about what they bring to the court.
Well, yeah. Well, to your point, I think that it was different, and that's what it is. I mean, we all know whenever, even as journalists, when we're covering something and it's and it's the same game story. You leave with the same game story. You're like, what the hell? All right, I got it. Of course, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do it effectively, but it's the same story, right? It's different when there's a fresh face, there's a new storyline, there's something crazy happened today. Like, now I don't have to lead with the same game story that I lead with every other time. It's different, it's fresh. That was Connecticut last year. They didn't lose their talent, they didn't lose anything about who they were or their identity, but what they did was they gained something new and something fresh. And so the players that were there and had already experienced some level of success wanted to continue to experience that success, but they did it in a different way with the offense centered around AT and her strengths. It was different than what Kurt Miller brought. Still the same level of success, but just in a different way. And they embraced it. I used to say to AT all the time, girl, I've never seen you smile so much. I've never seen you have so much fun. And she's just like, yeah, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm having a good time. There's just a different energy, a different aura. Dewana Bonner was like, hey, I've been in this league 14 years and I still feel like I'm learning something new. So I think what Stephanie White did was just kind of bring a renewed sense of fun and a renewed sense of winning culture to a team that wasn't necessarily losing, but they just love to have something different. I think with this year, even as you mentioned, DB and other players that are still like vying for a spot, these spots, there are only 2 rookies for real on this roster. Everyone else, while new to Connecticut, not new to the WNBA, not new to being in an environment of winning. I mentioned Rachel. Rachel's coming from Minnesota. They won crap when Rachel was there. Stu was a part of that Chicago success team. You mentioned, like, these are people who know what it means to win and they understand. And it's funny because, I have not been to training camp yet. It's funny, Brendan and I are talking about going to check out some camp as well as a preseason game before the opener on the 14th against none other than Indiana and the Fever. So you already know what that's gonna look like, right? But I have been making sure that I keep up with some of the writers, and Maggie, who writes for the CT Insider, she is an amazing writer. I love Maggie, but she definitely wrote earlier today as she had a conversation with DB, and DB was basically saying, like, it's great when you have vets that you don't have to talk through things with, people who already understand what basketball and the hugeness of what this season means for us. She's saying that the talent is changing, but to be able to just go to the court and play and not really have to slow down, not really having to teach anything, having veterans that can really just come in and keep up with the pace is going to be a good thing. And I think that that's going to be the difference for Connecticut versus some other teams that are bringing in kind of a renewed roster, is that they have the structure with their coach. They have the presence in the core with Breezy, AT, and DB, that no matter who they get to fit those 3 available spots, it still feels as if they have the potential to still remain a contender. I mean, going out in the semifinals is after losing Breezy the way that you did, after most people wrote you guys off, after AT feeling robbed of the MVP conversation, like all of that is really just going to continue to serve as motivation. This team is still mad about losing the 2019 finals to Washington. Okay. Like they are still mad about that. So nothing about their energy is going to change, even if their roster does.
This is a perfect transition, and we'll move on to the rest of the contenders in a second. But I do have a couple more notes on Connecticut because I love talking about this. Steph White first. I mean, I just couldn't be more impressed. Everything you said and attested to being in market there. I've even been able to pick up on that just when they come to New York. And it's her ability as a communicator. You get this in the press with her. She is so clear in what she says. Like she is just straightforward and clear in breaking down the game. And you see that manifest on the court and everyone being really comfortable. She also has the long view. Like this team was a contender last year. They have been a title contender for half a decade now. Honestly, longer than half a decade.
Yeah.
And yet still the intentionality and the foresight to say, you know what? I want to let Ty Harris run this offense for extended stretches. Friend of the pod, Ty Harris, by the way, I think episode 11, another plug, past episodes, South Carolina legend, come on. But to hand her the keys and say, hey, we trust you. And you saw in the playoffs that paid off. Ty Harris was exceptional. Dejanay, all these younger players gaining comfortability. And then the last note I wanted to highlight, Breezy. I hate framing things in terms of underrated and overrated because I think, it can be a crutch for us as media members sometimes, whatever. And also in the age of like information, all this stuff, how are you even possibly underrated? No, Breezy is underrated. Like, I don't care. Every single number you look at, I don't care if it's old school numbers. I don't care if it's advanced numbers. She is so good. And for them to push New York to 4 games last year in the semis and not have Breezy on the court, like if they can just get a full year with Dawana, AT, and Breezy healthy and this depth that we've attested to, I would love to see it because she on both ends of the floor is such a stabilizing force, so efficient, just so positive in everything she brings. And I just really hope that she can have a healthy season and just kind of remind people of that.
Well, can I just throw one thing to your point?
Yeah, I was gonna say we were just getting there. We were getting there with Breezy. I feel like multiple All-Star nominations, and it feels like the conversation was starting to come through. And then just this league moves so quickly. There's just all these games so compressed and how quickly we forget. But yeah, that might be, one of the top free agent acquisitions is just bringing her back to the roster is huge for them.
The only thing that I would add to your point, Owen, before we move on is as you talk about Steph being a good communicator, first off, I had the ability to call her my colleague for a little while too, right? So she's friendly with the media because for half a season, Sith, you are media, okay? Right. So there's that. But also, she's a former player at a high level. And I don't think folks really or truly understand how important that is to the dynamic of a locker room when the person who is in charge is someone who has literally been in your shoes. They know what it means to play at a high level. They know what it means to be successful. They also know what it means to lose. They also know what it means when shit isn't clicking in a locker room and how that can be detrimental to a team. I think that brings a different level of respect. This is not at all to say they did not respect Kurt Miller, because I think he's one of the few respected coaches in this league. But I am saying it just brings a renewed sense of understanding, and it opens you up to be able to try more and different things, because the word is not just coming from a former head coach who was a player, but your former assistant coaches. Breon January, former player at a high level for this organization. Austin, also former player collegiately. Like, he understands, married to a former player in the WNBA. So there's to have an entire roster built on Abby, former player, to have an entire coaching staff built on former players just brings a whole different dynamic that really I saw last year make a true difference in how this team listened and how they executed.
And they've got half a dozen veterans that might as well be coaches at this point in that huddle
Seriously.
as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of experience. There's a lot of experience there.
I've seen them just get DB to clipboard. Like, well, damn.
Oh, and we could go in two directions here. So I'm gonna let you drive for a second because T is setting us up for like we can go the route of talking about Steph White and what she did in terms of her analyst work, and then talk about the college class, or we could talk about the other contenders in the W. So Owen, I'm gonna let you drive this one and steer us now.
This is beautiful. I love this. That's teamwork. Come on. I will. I'm gonna choose the route of the contenders because I'm glad that you mentioned Steph as an analyst. Like she was so damn good in the tournament. I mean, like anytime she was on the call, just informative. I'm always in awe of people. It's like, oh, this is my second job. I'm just excellent at this too. So shout out to Steph White. But yeah, let's talk about the other contenders. We've got Las Vegas going for the first three-peat since the Comets, the only three-peat since the Comets. They just were the first back-to-back since the Sparks 2 decades prior. You've got New York, who might have that continuity year 2 that they didn't come into training camp with year 1. And Myles and I are seeing this being in market in training camp, that last year it took a long time to get everyone on the same page and get everyone healthy. They are starting training camp from a way stronger standpoint than they were last year. And then you've got these new teams. You've got Seattle. You've got Phoenix. So I am going to leave this open-ended. What is a team you are looking forward to watching from this next tier of contenders, and who's someone you think could maybe be frisky? Are the Aces just going to walk to a three-peat? Like, what are we looking for from this next tier? And by the way, Connecticut firmly in this tier, let it be known. That's why we led with them.
Yeah, I'm going to remove Las Vegas, New York, and Connecticut from this conversation because I think you have to be living under a rock to think that those 3 teams will not be 3 of the top teams standing at the end of the season. I don't care what the training camp roster looks like. I don't care what you talk about right now. By the end of the year, those 3 teams will absolutely be in the conversation. It just kind of is what it is. But I think Seattle is the team that really strikes me as, could this be a worst to first type situation? And granted, they weren't the worst team in the league last year, but could this be a worst to first type situation? Because adding a Nneka Ogwumike and a Skylar Diggins-Smith to any roster is automatically going to catapult your team. Adding them together to the same roster is ridiculous. And I have always felt that Noelle Quinn is what people would consider a player's coach. Again, as we just talked about, former players who understand what it's like to be in your shoes, who has the respect of her team. You have to have a certain level of respect to coach a Nneka and a Skylar, because that's just kind of what it is. I haven't even mentioned Jewel Lloyd yet. I haven't even mentioned the opportunity that we have to see. I'm drawing a blank. Defensive player. Ezzy, oh my God, I am in love with Ezzy. I just feel like platonically, guys, I'm in love with Ezzy. But I have felt that her defensive prowess is ridiculous and can do numbers. And now you've got Jewel, who has some assistants who can help. Seattle, arguably a 4 seed for me. Eat like without even seeing them play. Arguably a 4 seed for me. I'm not exactly sold on Phoenix just yet. And most of that is because of coaching. I'm just not familiar with his coaching style in the WNBA to feel confident enough that even with bringing over some solid players like a Natasha Cloud, like adding a Beck Allen, who was so amazing for Connecticut last year, I'm not sold just yet. Doesn't mean they can't be great. I just need to really see it. But when I think of contenders, I think of Seattle. And call me crazy, and this ain't the Caitlin Clark effect, but I'm throwing Indiana in the conversation. Why I'm throwing Indiana in the conversation is because I was completely impressed at how they really brought themselves together to rally around, at times, Aaliyah Boston. And I say at times because you could tell when they were following directions and getting the ball in Aaliyah's hands, they look unstoppable. When they stop following directions and start doing stupid shit, like giving the ball to everybody else but Aaliyah, you could see the effects of that too. Something tells me that this year, with more eyes, with more coverage, with more at stake, they're going to be more inclined to follow directions. And this team is a team that when they're doing that, and now you've added a Caitlin Clark, who, although I've said publicly and will continue to say that I don't think her shooting volume will increase more so than what we saw in Iowa, I think her passing ability is so underrated. She's going to be incredible as a facilitator in my mind. And I think that's going to fare well for both Aaliyah and Melissa. And of course, Kelsey's going to shoot because that's what shooters do. This Indiana team, to me, can actually be a contender. Maybe they don't win the whole championship. I'm not saying they're gonna win it, but what I am saying, I think they could be a top seed in this league and can really give folks a run for their money. Like, I don't think they barely get in. I think they have the ability to really be a solid 5 or 6. So that's like, to me, those are the two that I am truly keeping my eye on, as I feel that are real contenders. Washington's always going to be in the conversation because Washington typically is. They usually find a way to screw themselves towards the end of the season, but they start strong usually. So you know how Washington get down. They usually crash somewhere in a 4 or 5 lane. So
even
I think
without Tosh, even without EDD, like you're still high on them.
I still think that they get in the playoffs.
Okay.
I still think that they get in the playoffs. Your girl DD Richards is there. She's on a training camp contract. I know that
DD Richards is there.
She's gonna, I know, I feel like DD's gonna make the team. So I think they get in the playoffs. The other team that I am not sure about, that I'd like to know, maybe a strong maybe, is Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I fall on Atlanta. Atlanta's another team that for the last couple of years have been right there. Like, they've just been right there. And then for whatever reason, it's, last minute icky stuff that you're just like, what's happening? But I feel like Atlanta now, especially with adding Jordan to their roster, I think this Atlanta team can be great. And they've added Tina Charles, so they've got a big to replace. Like, come on, like, this is a team that they could definitely be in the conversation. So I don't know, like, to me, those are the teams that stand out. So just as a recap, Seattle for sure. I think Indiana's in it. And I'd like to see what happens with Atlanta.
So I have a couple of things on that. And we just saw that Jordan Canada is going to be out for a while with a hand injury. Yeah. And then looking at Dallas and seeing Satu being out really brings their ceiling down after we saw an impressive year from them last year. So, like,
can I get credit for calling her for the 6th player of the year? I mean, most improved. I was saying all year Satu should be most improved. And somebody on this call, but I ain't gonna name no names, Myles, was kind of arguing with me about her being most improved. Is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm gonna throw it out there.
Just sipping this tea.
No
I'm just the tea.
Nope.
I'm just having fun.
Sipping his wine. Just sipping
no
his
comment. Wine. My ballot was not public, so thank you for putting that up. No, I think it was public on this podcast actually. So no, I wanted to bring the conversation back to Indiana because that is the biggest swing for me, is that they could be as high as, in my eyes, the 5 seed or as low as the 10 seed. Like, that is, and that's a couple of games out of the a couple of teams out of the playoffs, a couple of temes in the playoffs. Yeah. And when you bring up Caitlin's passing, and we've talked about the shooting, the logo shooting, that's what's going to land you on SportsCenter, but that is not what's going to win you games. Mm-hmm. And you look at Caitlin, and she made Monica Sonano a household name. Hannah Stuelke went off for 50 this year.
Yeah.
She loves playing that pick and roll, and she throws terrific entry passes, which is a lost art, which every big is going to tell you in the league. And she throws those entry passes. She's always got her head up looking for the break. So she's going to get them some easy buckets. I think that's where Indiana, because they are still a really young team that can run, they can play some defense too when you talk about Aaliyah at the back, but also Lexi Hull and the growth that we've seen from her and some veterans. And I know that Erica Wheeler has been on this PR tour as a mentor now, which is kind of awesome. But Erica and Kelsey Mitchell being there, that's a good guard group that Caitlin is coming into. That roster is sneaky deep, and we were starting to see it last year. So I'm really excited about how long it takes all of that to gel, and if we are already seeing out. I know that like this is a little bit break the fourth wall because we are media talking about it, but we are seeing some cracks in Caitlin, who is held in front of every single camera and does not have room to breathe. I hope that she's able to kind of persevere through that, because shout out to Ryan Stevens at Indiana. You're gonna be working 2 jobs this year just taking care of Caitlin alone, let alone the rest of that team. I hope that they're able to treat her right. I hope we're able to get all these players on chartered flights, because all of that is even more of a problem than it's been before, and that's hard to say with what BG went through last year. But if they can keep it locked in and keep the main thing in staying focused on game to game, that's a roster that is going to push a lot of people, and Caitlin might be a catalyst for growth of the league in terms of bringing in new eyeballs. But in terms of growth of the Fever, it's what she does when she's not shooting the ball that I think is going to bring them to a level that they could not get to last year.
Yep, I would totally agree with that. I believe that, and she said it, like she has said it, that she enjoys passing the ball. She enjoys being a facilitator. That's the strength that she absolutely has to and must play to really catapult this Fever team. Because I agree with you, they could be the bottom of the barrel, or they could be one of the top seed. I could even give them a 4 seed, and only because of Dallas. The injury to Satu, I think, is going to be huge.
Well, I'm saying, so who do you have dropping out then, of if the top 4 in some order?
Well, to me, that was the top 4. Like the
Connecticut
top 4 to me, yeah.
Oh, you don't
me,
have Seattle up there?
No. That was. So I think Seattle could be a 4. I just said I think Seattle could be a 4 seed. But if I'm looking at last year, where it was Las Vegas, New York, Connecticut, Dallas, like that was the top 4. Dallas to me dropped out of that when Satu like left. It isn't going to be available, right? So that to me leaves the 4th spot available for an Indiana team, for a Seattle team. I'm not sure who else at this point I feel comfortable putting in that spot. But like, to me, I feel like those 2, as currently constructed, based on how those final rosters will look, have the ability. I'm not quite ready to put Chicago in the playoffs just yet. I hope, however, that I'm wrong. I think they'll be exciting. I totally believe that
Teaspoon.
I think
we believe in Teaspoon.
I do believe in Teaspoon, but I'm this way with all first. I was this way with Stephanie until she started to prove me wrong her first year. I was like, I don't know. You know what I mean? You know, I love the Sun, but I don't know what's gonna happen. That was your first year. You gotta give some time. And then like a week in, I was like, well, maybe I was wrong. You know what I mean? Contrary to popular belief, you know, I can admit when I'm wrong. So I hope that I am wrong. I would love to see, you know, I love that Izzy's back. I think she's a difference maker. Marina, whenever Marina is like in a zone, she's in a zone. Her consistency was an issue for me, not her talent. She's consistent. She's definitely there. I just am a little bit on the fence on whether or not, I mean, this is a team that had some pretty good veterans last year, went through a lot of crap, lost their coach and GM and all of that stuff, and still managed to be hanging right in there in the conversation at the end of the season. So I'm certainly not writing them off. I'm also saying, I think this is a good year to build. I think this is a good year to gel. And I don't necessarily think you have to have the pressure of being a postseason or contender team. Like, you can just figure it out this year. Allow Teaspoon to just play her game, get her girls right. Maybe in a year or 2, you know, then I'm having the conversation of Chicago being a playoff team. But right now, I don't know. I don't feel it. And I don't think that is anything wrong with that. Like, I just don't think that is anything wrong with that. I don't think that's shade or being slighting or anything. I think there's going to be a fun team to watch. Can't wait to see what Angel does. Can't wait to see Camilla 6'7" just dominating in the paint. But in terms of wins and losses, that's not what I'm looking at when I'm looking at Chicago right now. I'm just looking more so with how they find continuity with each other, how they respond to Teaspoon, how she fits as a head coach in this league. That's what I'm looking at. Wins and losses will come to me for them.
100%. I love that. And I think it is the perfect year for Chicago to reset and, like you said, not have the overwhelming pressure. Like, Teaspoon is just going to rebuild this culture in a way. This is what they brought her in for. So you can have Camilla and Angel and these young players who you are now so invested in develop and learn from people like Elizabeth Williams, like Izzy Harrison, and grow organically in a way where there isn't this overwhelming pressure. Are you going to make the playoffs? Before we move on, I want to rapid fire because this is so beautiful. Like, Myles and I in our prep wanted to talk about the whole league today. And of course, you know, if you've ever read our writing, we tend to be a little wordy sometimes. So it's tough to like get everyone in. So this organically happened so wonderfully.
It did.
Rapid fire on a few of the teams before we kind of wrap up here. Seattle first. I love that you started with Seattle because I could not agree more that if ever there was a team that we have not seen it yet, we don't know what it's going to look like yet, and yet I still believe in them, it is this Seattle bunch. And I think Jewel Lloyd deserves so much damn credit for sticking it out. Like, she could have left and not a single soul would have blamed her. She won 2 titles. She is a 2-time WNBA champion. She has proven everything. And when everyone else left for very valid reasons, she could have jumped ship. And instead, nope, I like it here. I've built this name for myself here. And she's been rewarded with this amazing team around her. And you're going to see this year, you know, the growth of Ezi Magbagor, for instance, who got to grow over the last couple of years and expand her offensive game. Now, boom, she's back on a contender and she's a way better player. I'm so excited for Seattle. On the Indiana front, in talking about Caitlin's passing, I think that one of the most fun things to consider with this Fever team is the effect of everyone being elevated by there being more passing on the roster. And I think that one of the most underappreciated elements of Aaliyah Boston's game is that she can pass the ball really, really well for a center. It is not the flashiest part of her game. It's one of the last things we're going to talk about because she's elite defensively. She's an elite scorer, elite rebounder. She's just elite, frankly. I mean,
she's just elite.
Come on. I mean, like, very few players came into the league as a rookie and did what she did and just like clearly top 15, top 20 player immediately upon entering the league. That is rare. But when you consider, okay, Caitlin, Aaliyah pick and roll. Caitlin makes this great pass to Aaliyah. Now the defense is scrambling. What about the next pass? We know Caitlin's going to make that first pass. What about the next pass that Aaliyah makes? What about the fact that Kelsey Mitchell spent years kind of, you know, going between being a 1, being a 2. She's naturally more of a shooting guard. She's just a bucket. But she had to kind of develop her passing and expand her game when Indiana needed her to. They are going to reap the benefits of that. We didn't even talk about Katie Lou Samuelson. Like, that team's going to be fun.
And I know you're rapid firing. I'm going to cut in because you just brought up a great point. But a lot is going to be made of the Aaliyah Caitlin pick and roll, and not so much about how hard Caitlin works to get free off the ball, and how important Aaliyah is going to be to that in terms of setting that up with off-ball screens, with off-ball passing. But yeah, if you're Kelsey Mitchell and you're like, wait, I can stay a pass away from that pick and roll, and like all of that action is there because she, and I think in AU we see it even more than we see it in the W, but her as someone who attacks downhill and gets to the bucket, we see her more as a shooter in the W, but she has that game too, where I don't want her coming at me. And if all that action is happening strong side and she can just cut and find her spots, this is going to be cookie. It's going to be easy for Kelsey this year.
Yeah. And I'm gonna throw on your rapid fire too, Owen, because we're just tearing your shit up right now.
Let's go. I love it.
But just really quick, despite everything that we've said about Caitlin not, going to be having these logo threes and all this other stuff like that, like she had in Iowa, the fact is players still know that she can. And they're going to defend her, which is going to help them spread the floor a lot differently.
Yeah.
And we know Kelsey Mitchell is one of the best pull-up, spot-up, quick release shooters in the game. All you need is for someone to think about double teaming Caitlin. The way she can get the ball out to Kelsey, who can quickly release that ball and let it sing, it's going to be fun too. That's what I'm saying. If they follow directions, follow directions, Indiana, and it's there for you. Follow directions.
It's such an excellent point. That stuff, the gravity builds off, every single person you add who has that gravity, it builds on itself. And like, I hope you do only have one person guarding Aaliyah Boston in the post, because guess what? She's gonna cook whoever that person is. And I'm sorry, elite footwork. Like, okay, so what's the natural response? Send a double team. Well, then you've got shooters. Then you got Caitlin. It's gonna be really fun to watch. This is a perfect transition here as we wrap up. I think we wanted to highlight the rookie class. We've talked about Caitlin. Everyone covers Caitlin. But who is another player in this rookie class? And it can be one of the two bigs from Chicago that we just mentioned. Can be anyone else. But who's just and it, it doesn't even have to be a rookie. It can just be a young player. Like, who's someone you're just excited to watch grow in this league and get better this season?
It is a rookie. It's a rookie who I think Connecticut probably would have, who I thought Connecticut would have picked up, but it is a rookie. And her name is De'Asia Fair.
Ooh, great choice.
Love that.
The fact that she is going to learn, because I have no doubt that she'll make a roster. Like I believe that she can make the Aces roster. But the fact that she gets to learn behind Chelsea Gray, the point guard herself, are you kidding me? Like, I don't think folks realize the steal that the Aces picked up in that draft when they picked up her. She, to me, is someone who went very underrated in college, playing her first few years at a University of Buffalo. And I give Felicia Leggett-Jack a lot of credit for how she coaches and her style of coaching and how she builds players that, one, do not ever have a fear of attacking the basket. So we know that De'Asia will definitely attack the basket, but she can spot up and shoot. Like, she can literally shake the best off. She has a great footwork, amazing handles. I want to see her develop more under Chelsea Gray. Like, if she can just become that kind of a guard, baby, De'Asia she's gonna be nasty. And so, like, I am excited to see her growth. Again, I think she can make a roster. I'm excited to see. Like, she's the player that I want to see. She's the player that I want to see.
I'm so glad.
Go ahead, Owen.
She is someone who's top 5 all time in scoring NCAA. Like, people need to put respect on her name.
Period.
On her. Maybe my favorite moment. Okay, that's a lie. My favorite moment of the tournament was South Carolina winning it. Let's not pretend. But my favorite moment of the first round of the tournament, the early rounds of the tournament, was De'Asia at the end of the game against Arizona, round 1. And that was a physical game. She had gotten hurt a little bit. It was like, oh, for a second, I thought she wasn't going to return to the game. But of course, anyone who knows De'Asia Fair's game, no, she's coming back in here. And then, I'm just going to score the final 10 points of the game. I'm going to carry my team to a matchup with UConn. And oh, by the way, we're going to give UConn a run for their money too. Like, I could not agree more. For the Aces to get her, and not even also Kate Martin. Like, we might look back on this and be like, yo, how did we let these two amazing players go second round to the Aces? Why?
How?
Yeah, well, all I wanted to say on De'Asia Fair also is there's something to be said about, well, partially about me in trying to watch this as media and understand as talent evaluation, that sometimes some of these players are at top conferences and it's hard to see how they're going to match up against the best competition. But De'Asia Fair was in so many of those moments and came up big in so many of those late games where you're like, oh, it's not just that she's third all time in scoring. It's that she wants the ball in her hands and she's a bucket and she's going to get her shot off. And it reminds me of, that Arike run that we still talk about every time March Madness rolls around. So there's something to it in that respect. And yes, we get to see some moments like that in the tournament. And that's where I think players like Rickea Jackson really separate themselves, is like the stage got bigger and her game got better. And I know Tennessee didn't go as far as I thought they would, but it was not her fault at all. She was maybe the best player on the floor every time they were out there. But that's the hardest part of the talent evaluation for me at the college level, is that sometimes you're going to have some, and this is when you talk about, you know, some of the non-conference schedules, but also some of the conferences that teams just generally are in. You're not going to see them night in and night out playing against the next wave of W talent. But it's in those moments where you're like, all right, this game is now 70-70. Who's getting the ball in this spot? And it was Deasia Fair taking the hardest shot that you've ever seen and just making it time and time again.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And, you know, I'm also very excited to see Rickea Jackson. I'm gonna always put on for Rickea Jackson. That's Detroit. Detroit, what, all day. She came out in the buffs, changed outfits on y'all in the draft. I was like, this is the most Detroit shit I've ever seen in my life, and I love it. Okay. So I definitely am excited to see her. I just thought that there were some names that truly fell a little bit further than I had expected or anticipated. And this kind of reminds me of and I might get the class wrong, but this reminds me, I want to say, of the 2021 draft, where the second round kind of felt like the round, right?
Yeah.
You know, that was, you know, Dejanay Carrington, I believe, was a second rounder in that draft. And like, it's just people who I feel like are going to be contributors, for lack of better terms. You might not necessarily be the star. You might not necessarily be, you know, the first option, but you're certainly capable of contributing big minutes, big moments, to really help push a team through. And I feel like Deasia Fair has all of the ability in the world to do that. And I just really want to see her develop. But if I'm also talking about young players who, not a rookie, just a young player really quickly, who I'm also interested in just seeing in year 2 for them, to me, that's Zia Cook. I'm interested in seeing how Zia Cook is going to maneuver in year 2 for her. You know, I felt like the ceiling for her, I feel like the ceiling for her is never ending, but I also feel like development is going to be super important. It's one of the reasons why I love AU. I love AU because regardless of what people may or may not think about AU or how they feel about the talent that goes to AU, there are a lot more WNBA players that are playing in AU now, which means the competition, which was already pretty stiff, the competition is different now, right? The level that you have to play at is different now. And those are the kind of things that really help you develop certain key skill sets in the off season. That to me was important for Zia. And so I'm interested in seeing her development this year. I think she could be like, I mentioned Dejanay Carrington, but I think she can be like a Dejanay Carrington. To me, Dejanay was an amazing player already, like as a second, you know, a second team option. But after playing at AU, after having to put on our coach's hat, having to understand scheme, semantics, and things of that nature, I feel like it made her a better player. And we've been able to see it. Now here she is 4 years in, and we're like, wow, like you are a key contributor to this Connecticut team. I feel like Zia has that opportunity. She has that opportunity to be a key contributor on a team. She has had the chance to really try to develop. And I think training camp, as well as how she, you know, fits in who actually makes that roster, could really be interested in her development and in the future. So I'm interested in seeing how she transitions this year.
My favorite thing about AU, and as you know, Owen and I did, 6 weeks of interviews with AU athletes this year, which was awesome, is that we get to see these players outside of a scheme, outside of a coaching system, actually like just playing straight to their strengths, because that is not always going to be possible, especially as AU. And I think the reason why season 3 was the most competitive is because they mostly leaned into bringing in this younger WNBA talent that is growing, that is looking for their role, and is showcasing what they do so well. And I think you saw that with Zia, who took like a week or two to kind of warm up and then drop 30, right? Who played to the rim And I think we've seen it with, like you said, Dejanay. We saw it with Lexi Hull last year. We saw it with
Yeah.
Melissa last year. And that there are some players that really step up. We saw it with Haley Jones a bit this year, kind of feeling out her role with playing almost like a pickup style that changes every week. But that let her be more physical going to the basket. And I think that's the kind of thing that if I'm Tanisha, right? If I'm Atlanta, I'm like, oh wait, we don't need to use her as our as our backup one if somebody goes down, but like she can bruise a little bit. And this kind of gives them a playground to play competitive hoops that, as Lexi Brown said on an episode of this pod, is not going to LA Fitness and having dudes try to prove something to you, that they can play these competitive hoops, stay local, but also work on really concrete things and showcase what they bring to WNBA competitors, which is not something. I feel like this is the year that the balance has shifted in AU from being, that supplementary opportunity to being, okay, this is W talent basically up and down that is now leveling up their game, and they're not just staying home, they are growing the game by being here.
Yep. I love that. I know this is a WNBA pod, women's basketball pod. But I want you guys to know that I just got distracted because my husband just walked in from work. And at the taping of this pod, there is a Knicks Sixers game that's going to be happening. And it just so happens that my husband's a Sixers fan. It just so happens that there are Knicks fans on this call. And when he noticed that I was talking to you two, he walked out. So
you know why? I'd be scared because Nixon. That's why.
I think it's understood. I think it's understood that there's some animosity between you guys right now.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm going to say this publicly. Shout out to Greg, great guy. I would love to get his thoughts on Game 4 of the first round between the Sixers and the Knicks. Yeah, just curious, see what he thinks about it.
I'm gonna let him give those thoughts off the podcast.
It kind of does feel like Game 4 at Wells Fargo, where Knicks fans were drowning out the Philly fans. That's kind of what the vibe is here.
No, seriously, like what's funny about that is he was in Philly for Game 4, and on the way home, I was like, "Hey, make sure you stop by Max's and get some cheesesteaks." And he called me and he said, "Yo, I'm about to walk out of here because there are more Knicks fans in here getting cheesesteaks than I am. Like not even hungry at this point. Like I'm ready to go."
I mean, we've waited a lifetime for this
moment.
We waited. No, all respect to Greg, and we have to finish. I'm gonna pull it back. I'm gonna be really, really good about this. Pull this back because what I like to do sometimes is just ask about a player that I have witnessed being great, or that I feel doesn't get the shine enough. And knowing that you have the access to Connecticut, I just wanted to ask for your favorite in all your time there, your favorite DB story, because when I was on the Sun beat a couple of years ago, that was something that I never knew until I witnessed it firsthand, was that she is a mother to everybody on that team and never gets the shine for that. So T, while we have you here in all of your experience, can you shine some light on DB and everything that makes her just awesome?
DB is everything. Like she is honestly one of the sweetest people that I've ever met. You are so right. I remember there are a couple of moments that like stand out in my head, like in covering DB. But one of the things that I find to be hilarious is DB's on offense. No, she's on defense at this time. Clearly, she's on defense. She's on defense at this time. And she's she's off on the wing, and I see her keep looking at the stands and like mouthing. I'm like, who is she talking to in the stand? Like, what is she doing? Well, Callie and Demi are in the stands. And every time she comes down to this particular side of the court, she's looking at the stands and she's mouthing to them, sit down. I see you. Okay. Hi. Because Callie and Demi do not care that their mother is one of the greats of the WNBA. They are in the stands doing what they want to do. And DB has spotted them in the stands and she's telling them to sit their ass down. Mom, how are you being so like, what are you doing? And it is the cutest and the funniest thing. and I think it's the purity of it that, she comes out the timeout and they're all talking and they're all huddled and you can see her with her hands on her hips and she's looking in the stands and she's like talking to the babies. It is the cutest, funniest thing. And I think it just truly embodies DB, that no matter what, her instincts will always kick in. She's nurturing, but she will put the hammer down, like, sit down, and that's the funniest thing. I love that about her. I think another one is the game in which she went off and set her career high for like 43 points at like 40 years old. And I had the producer in my ear asking me to ask her about what it means to have this kind of accomplishment at like 30 some odd, 36 years old, 35 years old or whatever. And I'm like, y'all have got to be crazy to think that I'm about to lead this conversation asking DB about her age. But what I didn't realize is that we were live on camera. And so that particular part of my response, the producer actually came out on air, and DB's cracking up because she's like, girl, I'm old. And and I recognize that I'm old. And it's the funniest thing in the world because she clearly, and what I love most is that she's starting to embrace that I'm old, I'm a vet, and I'm gonna do what I want and I'm gonna say what I want. And I think we saw so much of that last year. AT didn't have to talk about herself because DeWanna Bonner would grab the mic and talk about AT for her. She would say things like, listen, everybody on this team is held accountable. I think Dejanay Carrington is one of the best players, on this team, but I ain't gonna never tell her that. She gonna have, like, she would say these things. And I love that so much, that she just brings an energy around her that is full of joy. She's a very serious player in terms of when it's time to get down to business, it's time to get down to business, but she never let it overtakes the joy that she has for her team and for basketball. And for anyone who just has not yet understood what this woman has accomplished as a player in this league over her 14 seasons, you might want to Google. Like, you might want to read a few articles. Mark wrote a great one. I wrote a couple for Slam. Like, understand how important she is and has been to the WNBA. I'm so excited to see her back in Connecticut another year.
Man, so this is the problem, is that we normally do not stop talking until someone calls last call. So I have a couple of responses. This was supposed to be the sign off, but you had me thinking the first time that Connecticut came to New York last year,
Yeah.
it was DB out for pregame with Beck Allen. And it was Beck's first time back in New York. So all of us New York media were in there like, hey, Beck, like, great to see you, blah, blah, blah. And then DB the whole time was like, y'all don't have questions for me? And then as she walks out after that, she turns at the door and she goes, you're not going to wish us good luck? And it was the funniest thing before that game.
It's so her. That is so DB. Oh my God. It is so DB. It is crazy. I remember when she came back from Turkey a couple years ago, and literally she got back and the next day there was a game. Like, so she sat on the bench and then she came back like to play like the next game. And she was out there stretching. And she was just like, listen, I just got off the plane. I'm tired. Like, I don't need y'all to write no stories about how my performance is going to be today. I don't need y'all to act like. It was the funniest thing because you're like, DB, I don't care how much you just got off a plane. You're about to go out here and kill it as you always do. But the fact that she's just like, I don't need y'all to write no stories about me because I just got off the plane and I'm tired. That's just the personality that she has.
Respect. And I appreciate you bringing up the age, because as Owen was witness to yesterday in that conversation where he may or may not have asked a question to Courtney Vandersloot, Sloot was talking about
Lucas Kaplan, by the way. Shout out to Lucas Kaplan. I asked a Candace question, but I wanted to get back to that and give the journalist their credit. Lucas Kaplan asked the other Candace question, so shout out.
Be asking no age questions, Owen.
I was just saying that that Sloot had brought up that she is training for a bike race that is going to be raising funds for her mom is dealing with a very specific type of disease. So she and Allie Quigley are training to do a race. And she was talking about how difficult it is to bike so far in New York and everything like that. And I had to bring up to her that like it was really refreshing to hear that, because I know she's 3 days older than I am. So whenever I hear an athlete talk about how difficult something physically is, I'm like, thank God, because I thought this is just me out here. And Courtney came with that. So you bringing up the anecdote about DB being like, all right, my age, I'm like, yo, I feel it too. I don't run every day. It's even harder for me.
By 3 years, sis, you out here doing a lot more than I ever could. What are you talking about? Like, I can't do what you do on a good day. Are you kidding me?
I told Owen that there was a shift this year because I joined my first pickup basketball league since before the pandemic. And like I used to be that dude that was in like 3 days after work. I was in a softball league, I was in a whatever, a flag football, I was in a basketball. I was in great shape. And then I didn't do it for 4 years. And I joined this league and I'm running like 3-4 minute spurts. And my hand goes up. I'm like, yo, I need someone to come in and pull me. And it's because I'm also 35 years old. Like that's natural, but like my body slowed down at the same time I stopped doing shit. And that's kind of what caught up to me. And so I had a new appreciation, not for the players who are athletes, but I'm watching the referees yesterday at practice, because the Liberty have refs at training camp. And I'm like taking account in how heavily they're breathing as they run up and down. I'm like, yo, I couldn't even do that. I thought years ago I could be a practice player. And now I'm like, yo, I don't even think I could be a referee. I don't think I could go up and down for 2 hours.
You know what I could do at training camp? Be the timekeeper.
Even that.
I'll do my current job. I will write the stories. I will take the photos. I will push the buttons.
I got my pen and my notepad. That's all I'm good for.
I will drink the wine and watch y'all work out. But what I will not do is run my ass up and down this court no more. I learned that lesson quick. After I was done, I was done. And that was it. I've got nothing left.
As we've been for the last hour plus, we're gonna take a note from you, teeing this up, talking about drinking the wine. We want to say again, thank you to La Crema, because like, first of all, this conversation was going to be great regardless, but I think even loosening that faucet just a little bit brought us to another level. I hope I'll listen back to it after, but I hope made a great conversation, and it's really awesome just what they're doing with the league. And I think that this is like I said at the top, kind of a sponsorship deal that is really invested in the growth of the league and not just in being a name associated. And I think that we've seen that with teams in recent years, with ownership groups that are like, all right, we need to be in the league. We don't just need to be a part of it. And I think La Crema on the sponsorship side is showing that they are invested in doing that too. And we look forward to meeting them at a bunch of league events. And T, I mean, you know, we'll bring you on every week if we can. T, this is a great conversation all the time. Thank you. No, thank you for doing this, for making the time, for having these conversations that we don't have to clip together a bunch of voice notes in a group chat to make a podcast. We just had you on here for an hour instead. So we get the same stuff.
The things that we talk about in the group chat shall remain in the group chat until we take them out of the group chat.
It is for the best. That is absolutely for the best. Please do not cancel us. Please love us. Thank you for everyone for supporting us. T, thank you for coming on. We will hopefully see you in New York in a couple of weeks. I know every time you come through, we get that text, and maybe Owen will make it out one of these times.
Maybe Owen doesn't love me in real life, y'all. He loves me on the pod, but he don't love me in real life, y'all.
Oh, that's false.
You'll notice Owen ain't never in the pictures. It's just
lies. I have to receipt to prove it.
Well, T, we will see you soon. Thank you so much for coming on with us. And we're looking forward. The training camp is here. The season's around the corner. As you heard, Indiana might be a 4 seed. Tune in. Thank you, everybody. And back at it next week.
Thank you, T.